In this session, we are going to talk about Black Friday 2004 film, and we are going to do analysis of the various elements that are there in the script. So this is kind of a precursory session to the session that I would be taking about um, events and news events as a source material for screenplays. So we had a screening and then followed by which this presentation and discussion. So let's look at it. What are the basic elements that went into um, the film and things that you noticed and things that would have possibly gone into the script. First is the event. If there is no event, there is no film or there is no script at the first place. We'll look at the script. So when we look at the event, this is an event which can be easily defined as a cataclysm. A cataclysm is an event that occurs in a massive scale and creates a lot of damage to human life and the society at large. And this particular event in question, which based on which this script was written, was the 1993 Bombay blast. The source of the script or the source for the screenplay would be possibly based on these points that I'm going to talk about. First is news reports. So news reports and news articles that were published across newspapers and magazines by different media houses about the event, on the event. So right after the event happened, the subsequent day, that would be 13th March. 13th March onwards, all the written material that goes into in the newspaper space or the magazine space. Next is judicial and police procedural findings. When we say judicial and police procedural findings, what I'm kind of looking at is all the events that happened in the court of law, all the judicial proceedings that happened, and what are the findings that came up. Now, this is one of the highly charge-sheeted cases and one of the most anticipated cases. It almost took 20 years for the judges to finally come up with a closing hearing, so to say. So in between, so many hearing dates were announced and so many court proceedings happened. So one is the judicial proceedings or the court proceedings and what are the findings that would come out of it. Second is the police procedural findings. The police procedural findings would refer to the investigation, the filing of charge sheets, then looking at who are the people who are involved and what sort of information the police commissioner offered in the different press conferences that happened. Hussain Jaidi is the journalist who wrote this book called Black Friday, the true story of the Bombay bomb blast, primarily based on which this script was written. So the script is drawn from Hussain Jaidi's book, or it is adapted. That's why you've seen the film also. It says based on the book by Hussain Jaidi called Black Friday. So Hussain Jaidi is India's top non-fiction crime writer who has documented almost 5 decades of crime history, especially in Bombay, and largely looking at the several big events that has happened in the mafia history or crime history, and kind of tracing the evolution or the genealogy of crime in India, so to say, and looking at it from an epicenter of Bombay. So that worked as one of the primary sources. Then the incidents behind the blast would also become a source when you try to go and research while developing a script, you need to do location recce for two purposes. One is that it allows you to get an idea about what kind of place people live in. Second is you get to meet people, interview people. So drawn from the book, all the incidents that happened, you try to create a timeline of those incidents and events that led to the blast. So everybody speaks about the blast per se. Everybody speaks about the event per se. But what is interesting to explore in a script or in a film is the historical context, or how this could have led to such kind of an event that would occur. In the course of the interviews of people, you would also get to hear the testimonies of those people who were arrested and eventually got bails, or um, people belonging to the families of those people who were accused and arrested. So you will get almost a first-hand and a second-hand sort of information drawn from their point of view or their perspective. Many a times what happens is we tend to judge people, that these are the kind of communities who give India a bad rep, and they're communal in nature, they're violent in nature. But what is the causality of violence? We can only get a picture of that causality of violence once we get into get in the place or talk to those people. So the reference that we get from them is largely a first-hand account of those things. That's why it's called testimonies. Now, a similar exercise was done previously by another gentleman called P.A. Sebastian, who was a human rights lawyer, who compiled a book based on the testimonies of those people arrested called Voices. And that unedited manuscript, which was kind of floating in the market, which never got into publishing, was somehow made accessible to the writer, in this case, the director of the film, who kind of developed this film. And Hussein Jaidi's book and Voices, this untitled manuscript, primarily worked as the already existing written material, which gives you a massive, you know, uh, repository of information about this huge event that occurred. So these are the things that work as the source that would help you to understand how this film could have been possibly written, or what is the source of inspiration, or what is the material from which this could possibly be drawn from. Next is I want to talk a bit about the beginning. There isn't much that you would come across in the web about the making. So this is drawn from some conversations that has occurred in different media platforms which are there, and then I did a bit of study, and that's how I kind of created this slide. So the beginning is like this, that it started off as a pre-production research material for a television series, mini-series for Aaj Tak. It was conceptualized to be a television mini-series, a 6-episode series for Aaj Tak. And the director of the film, Anurag Kashyap, was supposed to be the writer of the film. I mean, writer of the series. He wasn't supposed to direct. It was supposed to be directed by another director called Aditya Bhattacharya. After this series was written, and when the first discussion happened, Aaj Tak, those people who were helming the affairs then would take the call. They somehow got scared with the kind of exhibition of reality that was offered in the content, and they kind of backed out. The project eventually got shelved, and somebody else got interested in that material. And Anurag, the writer, proposed the director, then who was supposed to direct the film, I mean, direct the series, that there is a possibility of a film that he sees. And the director said, Aditya said that if there is a possibility that you see, then why don't you go ahead and do it since you have spent considerable amount of time developing the script. So finally, it so happened that Anurag was given the charge to go ahead and direct the film, and that's how it started. Because it was written in the format of a television series, that's why you would see the intertitles that were used, saying that chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, right? This film was written in a docudrama style for production. What's a docudrama style for production? So a docudrama is basically a combination of documentary and a dramatic narrative. So when you're trying to dramatize an event that has occurred in the past, in the style of a documentary, your treatment, your visual treatment, your narrative treatment is especially documentary style, then it's called a docudrama, which is based on a real event. And while writing them, you must keep those things in mind, that the genre is not just a hard-hitting drama, but it's a documentary drama. So you're creating material, you're writing a script so that a docudrama could be produced, not just a drama. So you're not dramatizing it entirely, because you would also see the film intercutting between original actual news footage from different television news of that time, and then giving you a juxtaposed frame of how they have interpreted that particular incident. Then Kashyap researched for a year, including attending court proceedings to see how criminals look and to observe how court procedures work. So it's a great point of learning for anybody who wants to develop gritty, hard-hitting dramas based on real life. If the case is still in court, which is what it was when Kashyap was doing his research, you can go to the court and get a first-hand understanding of how those accused would appear, or observe how um, they are presenting themselves in the court of law. Then he also watched actual footage from the government's film division, read all the newspaper describing the incident, and looked at the press photographs. Now, these are great source for research. Before writing the script, if you have those sort of understanding, if you have actually done what is called as the pre-production research when you're developing such sort of narrative, it comes really handy, because you can go deep in and create sequences which are extremely close to reality. It gives you almost an enthralling experience, or provides you one of the most accurate or closest representation of what would have possibly happened. Because a real incident happens and it's just a flow of time. So when you're trying to reinterpret that, it always comes handy when you are playing around with materials which are available to you, based on actual realities. The final draft of the script was written in 36 hours flat, basically 1.5 day. So to write a film which is close to 160 minutes, 160, 170 minutes in a day and a half is an extremely challenging job. But it could come along. Try and understand. Look at the points that we have discussed so far. Those things would lead to the script to be written in 36 hours flat. If you are starting from the scratch, you might not be able to do so. So let's talk a bit about the script. The script is a feature narrative. A feature narrative is a narrative film which is feature length, which spans anywhere between 60 minutes to 300 minutes, and it can go on and on as well. But yeah, bare minimum, which is accepted by the industry, is 60 minutes and above, something that can be considered as a feature film. So it's a feature narrative. The timeline follows a combination of chronological and non-chronological sequences. Um, why I said that it's a combination of chronological and non-chronological sequences are written in that style is because you would see some sequences and try to make sense of, okay, this event occurs after this. So there is this blast happened, then you go back. Blast happened, you begin with the blast, and then you slowly proceed towards all the investigation that would happen. So while that is following a chronological order, all the investigations that come up or that is written or shown is non-chronological in nature. It's not following a chronology. It's following different parallels. It's following parallels of characters. It's following parallels of smaller incidents and events that would lead. So that's a lot of threading that has happened in the film. That's why I called it as a combination of chronological and non-chronological sequences. Then the script is written with a narration from multiple characters' point of view. Something that you would have noticed if you would have carefully watched the film, that the film is not just following the police's action, it's also following the accused and their stories. So there is Asghar Mukaddam's character, which offers you a basic insight into how um, all these people congregated, uh, gives you an introduction to the team in Asghar's voice. Then there is Badshah Khan, who gives you a greater insight about the causality of action as to why this happened, kind of a justifiable framework as to why they did what they did. And then there is the police point of view. So police point of view is not done from a narration point of view, but through actions, through the depiction of how police action was acted out. Those things could have been possibly written. Then writing is rewriting the event. Now event has occurred. What you are trying to do in the script is you are trying to rewrite that event. So when you are trying to rewrite that event, what are the necessary steps that you are going to follow? What are the things that you are going to keep in the script? What are the things that you are going to keep away? Because the extended cut of the film was close to 5.5 hours. And that's something that Anurag says in a couple of interviews. So the script is, let's say, a 3 hour tight one. That's 300 pages. So an event of that scale, and then you go deep researching into all the materials that are available, into the incidents, into the people, and then how much of it you can retain, which would give you a truthful representation of that event and interpretation of an event from a cinematic audience point of view. That would make sense. So you treat it just as an event, or you would get into the base of try to restructure or rewrite and see how in the timeline it fits in the logic of writing, because that logic of writing is also important, how you present it. It's again subjective, but still you need to have some sort of a reasoning, logical reasoning behind why these patterns are followed. What is past is prologue. There is an interesting intertitle, which I don't know how many of you noticed, but which is there, called What is Past is Prologue. Now, what is past is prologue? How can you have past and prologue in the same sentence? Now, it's very interestingly juxtaposed that way, that what refers to the past is what led to that event. Now, you have seen the film, you get a broader perspective or an idea about why this happened. So there is 6th December, which led to 12th March, 6th December 1992, and what happened subsequently in the next 2 months led to 12th March 1993. So Babri Masjid demolition and all the riots that followed across the country and more so in Bombay because Bombay was terribly affected would lead to this kind of an event. So what has happened in the past is where the beginning is. So you need to go back in history to trace the origin of this event or the incident. By doing so, by doing that kind of a writing, what um, the scriptwriter has done is he offers you a historical context to the narrative. So there is a film that is there, and there is an historical way in which this film has to be interpreted, and you need to look at the parallel tropes that exist. We can't look at it in isolation and say that okay, this is an event that has happened, and what the scriptwriter or the filmmaker is trying to do is it's offering a reflection of that incident. But the film deep dives way more into um, other segments which would lead to this sort of a situation. So that's sort of, you know, an idea, that's sort of a kind of a knowledge framework that he gives you about what would lead from 6 December 1992 to this particular event through characters enacting or performing is fascinating. The script, I feel, is non-judgmental in nature. It presents what you see is a film. How I look at it is from the point of view of the script. I feel that the film's presentation or the script's presentation is non-judgmental in nature. So they have not tried to forcibly retain a balance between how the audiences or the readers of this text are going to interpret or look at the cops or the police machinery or the law and order and the accused. So whether you are taking an accused side from an empathetic point of view, or you are looking at the cops and see how they are trying to do their duty, and in the process they are trying to cross the line. So rather than doing that, you're offering an as it is sort of a situation and lending the public to develop their own ideas around it. So as a writer, you need to stay as objective as you can and stay non-judgmental, because the moment I start taking a side, then I'm already biased. What happens when you are biased is you tend to lose perspective. You tend to probably subconsciously hit one side of the story. Then it would probably end up being a propagandist content than the film that it is. Okay. Certain insights about the characters, actions, and dialogues, and why those things should be kept in mind while developing a script like Black Friday. Um, the script is drawn from the lives of real people. Um, all the people that you see in the film are real. All the characters are real. There are names that are changed. Some of their names have been changed. Some of the names have been retained. Um, but what you see is basically a glimpse of, how people existed during that time or what happened with them. That leads me to the next point, which is basically why I consider this film to be a demographic and psychographic study through the actions of the characters. Everything that you would see um, in the film, as far as the actions of the characters are concerned, offers you some sort of an insight or the other into the demographic and psychographic aspect of life. It's a great community study. It's great profiling of the accused, where they lived, what kind of food they eat, who do they hang out with, what were their dreams and aspirations, how their lives got affected, what are the age group that they are in when all these things happened. how are their families, how did their families respond or react to certain situations or incidents or events that happened in their life. And then the next, this is the demographic aspect of it. Then the next part is the psychographic study, which is basically trying to delve into the mindsets of these people, the mindsets of these characters, what would lead to their actions. Because what you see in the film and what has gone into the script is basically a depiction of their actions or the nature of action, which is the next point. What is the nature of action that we observe in this script or in this film? The nature of action is brutal, it's violent. Right from the beginning, from the very first frame till almost the end, what you see is a lot of brutality and violence done by both sides, done by the police, done by the perpetrators or the accused. The nature of action is also vulnerable. There is a scene where you would see an extreme tight face of the character of SCP Rakesh Maria, which was played by KK Menon. His face looked extremely vulnerable because he didn't know he was also a young cop by then, who had so much of responsibility on his shoulder to crack this case. Now, how do you maintain your composure while dealing with people who are so violent in nature? But is everyone driven by violence? Would they not break? So when you move from the character of Rakesh Maria to the character of Badshah Khan, after subsequent interrogations, you can see the look in his face. There is a sequence where he's asking for water and he said that I want to become a police witness. Before that, he was reading the Quran. And he accepts. So this whole thing of acceptance that, you are drawn into a situation, because this is one incident where majority of the people are from the extreme lower middle class, who were true to their profession and the business or whatever they were doing, and they faced a lot of loss, and they were used. They were used by people like Tiger Man, and how that entire incident was given a communal propaganda angle. So it's the helplessness that is shown, it's the vulnerability that is shown, apart from offering you several instances and reflection of how brutal that event was and the subsequent events were inside the police lockup. What was the motive of action? The motive of action is revenge. So when you write a revenge drama, it's always us versus them. There need to be two characters strong enough to fight each other out. Here it is the system, here it is the politics. Don't look at it from a point of view of just two people or three people or five characters. Look at it as structures and social units. Look at it from the point of view of religion or communalist propaganda versus ethics. Look at it from a point of view of violence versus non-violence. Look at it from the point of view of how communalism can spread these kind of actions and can lead to fundamentalistic discourses that will drive you with such kind of motives. So those are the subtexts, those are the layers that were added to the characters' actions. Then from the police point of view, when you see what they do is basically beyond the book of law. There's a lot of violation of human rights. There's a scene where, there journalists were hounding Rakesh Maria, and he says, what about the human rights of those people who got killed in the blast? then they have violent repercussions. So in order to ensure that justice is served and those people break down and give them some sort of an information about the case, they have to sometime cross the line and do so. So the cases of police brutality is not new. Then a little bit about the dialogues. These are things that we need to pay attention to while developing scripts or listening, because our olfactory nerves need to be extremely active while consuming such kind of content which are intense in nature. The dialogues are colloquial in nature, as you would have noticed. The slang was Bombaya or Marathi, and there's typical way they would speak. So it's written in such a way that it could be enacted easily by those people who have lived there in those places, of people who can prep to deliver things colloquially. So that is one angle to it. The other angle is the formal or the technical language in which dialogues were written. That is from the police point of view. The jargons or the terms that were used um, pertains to mostly judiciary, pertains to police investigation. So when you are writing a drama which requires substantial amount of scenes and sequences, which is drawn from the police point of view, you need to write the dialogues in such a way that those people who are enacting them do not appear like they have just mocked up dialogues and they're saying it. They need to own those dialogues. It needs to be conversational in nature. When they speak, they need to speak with that kind of authority. So it depends a lot on how you are writing them, where you want to be brutal with your words, where you want to be soft, where you want to show empathy, where you want to confront. So those are the things that you need to keep in mind while developing dialogues. We are going to discuss dialogues in details when we get into that part. But yeah, as far as this film is concerned, the script is concerned, and the dialogues move between being colloquial and formal and technical. Then the dialogues are extremely smartly written, and Anurag is one of the masters of writing dialogues. They are not literary. You as a young screenwriter, many times we would encounter this challenge, or we would face this challenge, especially when we are adapting, a text which already exists. We tend to slowly, subconsciously slip into the literary tone of the material. So how do internalize the content, yet what you try to offer in terms of dialogue should not sound literary in nature. I'll give you a small example. I'm this funny, not in the context of this film, but because this film stayed true to how dialogue delivery has been done, and I'm sure it's written in that way. There is one of the films, one of the Rajashree production films, in which the heroine is asking the hero who has come back from work, जल ग्रहण करेंगे आप. If you guys can follow Hindi, you'll understand what I'm trying to say. Jal grahan karenge aap usually translates to would you have water? Otherwise, when a husband and wife they're talking, it would be pani loge aap ya pani दूं क्या? This is how it should be, right? Pani loge aap pani दूं क्या becomes jal grahan karenge aap. Jal grahan karenge aap is so Sanskritized and so literary. I don't know in which era people who talk in that style or in that language. So whenever you're watching a film, if you want to especially develop yourself into a screenwriter, please do pay attention to how the dialogues sound? Do they sound literary or they sound cinematic? When we are writing cinematic dialogues, the power and punch also comes from the writing. It works because they have been written with that kind of gravitas. So it sounds great when it comes from that space. Okay, the last slide would be about writing the locations because it's a great atmospheric drama as well. There's a lot of observational writing that has gone into it. What I mean by observational writing is when you do actual recce to the places and you tend to, you know, draw from things that you observe in and around. It could be everything that you see in that location and coming back and trying to create your own journal of whatever you have observed about those places and locations. Because 90% of the film was shot on real locations. There is no set that is created. Um, the rest of the 10% are not sets. They are altered. The locations are used. You can't shoot in Dowd's house, possibly. But you still have to show a White House. So how do you show a White House? Either you create a set for which the budget was not there, or you try to give some sort of a cinematic liberty, take some sort of a cinematic liberty and create something which gives you a close look at how Dowd's house could possibly look like. Otherwise, 90% of the film is shot on real locations. So there is a lot to observe in and around the locations that you want to use and then try to integrate them into the writing. So when you are doing so, what happens is at the script level itself, the locations and the places that are used feel rich and they feel real. The way the locations had been written also gives you a fairer understanding of how the scriptwriter has tried to describe the atmospherics of the place. Whether it is all the locations where the bombs were planted, busy streets, the location where the training camp happened, which says somewhere in Pakistan, or Badshah Khan's movement from his house in Uttar Pradesh to all the locations he traveled to, in Tonk in Rajasthan to Calcutta, giving you montage sequences of Calcutta, giving you montage sequences of Tonk in Rajasthan. Who are these people? Where do they come from? So that gives you a picture of what is the reality of their lives. Then offered reality versus the reality. What reality is offered in the script or in the film versus the actual reality. This film kind of tries to blur the line between that. That's why it's considered to be a significant docudrama because it cuts to actual footages and cuts back. So, and it does so in so much of fluidity that you are not suspended in any kind of a disbelief that you are watching a cinema. It almost feels real. So how close you want to go in your writing and in your presentation, and then eventually the production of a feature narrative like this, where the lines get blurred between the reality that you are offering as a creative talent versus an event-based reality. I think that has occurred in the past. Then what I also found interesting, which I thought could be a significant aspect when we talk about the various elements in the script of Black Friday, are the streets and lanes of Bombay and how they are used. You would get a picture of Ramzan when there are extreme wide shots that are used and almost giving you a bird's eye view of the city which is going through a festive, you know, timing where things are sacred. How do you try to do police investigation during that point in time? Or how these characters who have now committed such a grave crime, How do they try to camouflage themselves within the crowd and try to get lost? So the streets and lanes where the chase sequences also happen are to be written in such a way that you get a picture of how they are actually, instead of trying to give you a sanitized picture of the sets that are put up in different film cities and studios. So that's more or less what I wanted to share about the elements in the script of Anurag Kashyap's Black Friday.